My cousin actually swam with Mark Spitz.
Carry his paintings like the Mona Lisa he carried with him for like 20 years.
Mom was 75. My mother's now 101. My father had a stroke.
Masterpieces are never finished, they're abandoned.
I really am grateful that my parents did that.
I always played sports growing up, but I never had one sport that I dedicated myself. Welcome to the Willpower Podcast. Let's talk about swimming to start. So tell me about competitive swimming. Like, what is it like to be from such a young age, just like in a competitive sport like that?
I thought about that in a long time. It's so here's the reason I ended up in competitive swimming is I'm the oldest of 5, and it was something that my parents could do to keep us out of trouble. So we didn't end up running the streets. And my cousin actually swam with Mark Spitz out in California. So very high level swimming. And my mom and dad, my mother's, his mom was my mother's sister. And so my parents decided, okay, we're putting all the kids in swimming. And that actually ended up, I've looked back because as a female, I'm seeing lots of podcasts for men and women on working out, on starting later in life, etc. And it's never too late to start. I actually started my mother and father on a weight program when he had a stroke, when I think he was 76, mom was 75. My mother's now 101. So that really, that gives you a good example of why muscle's so important. But competitive swimming taught me a lot about, as a swimmer, you're on a team, but you're competing against yourself and you're working as a team. And you're setting goals, you're doing visualization, you're doing a lot of things that when I graduated from university, from college, it's funny, I put that whole competitive swimming experience aside because now I was in business. And about a year into it, I realized, oh my goodness, all these lessons that I learned as a competitive swimmer and the consistency, persistency, etc. I really am grateful that my parents did that. And we were known as the swimming Hockers. We had someone in every age group. It was pretty funny. My father was a very successful engineer in the petroleum industry with legislation, all kinds of things. But he used to laugh. He said, I'd get on a plane and, you introduce yourself. My name is, and invariably someone would say of the swimming Hockers because we were pretty well known in Oklahoma where I grew up.
Was it difficult to, like, when you inevitably stopped swimming, what was that? Was that hard to, like, step away from something that was...
Oh, I was tired of swimming 10 miles a day. So it was like relief. It's funny, people would say, let's go to the pool. And I'm thinking, I don't know what to do at a swimming pool except swim laps. What do you do at a pool? Since then, I've chilled a little. But when I stepped away, I was actually really glad because we got up at 5:30 in the morning. I swam in junior high and high school. Got up at 5:30, swam from 6 to 8, then went straight to school, usually with wet hair. And I had really long hair. And then in the evening, swam again for 2 hours. Sometimes I would just sleep in my swimsuit, as a kid, because you had to get up again at 5:30. So I swam all the way through college. I swam on a scholarship. Well, I swam on the men's team, and then Title IX came along, and then I got a scholarship. And so by the time I graduated, I was ready to stop. And one of my sisters actually still swims masters, and she's nationally ranked. She's a distance swimmer, but I since I'm in the business world and I actually own my own business, work for myself, that's competitive enough. So that's how I transitioned to yoga. And I always say biz lessons from yoga, which is about staying on your own mat, competing against yourself, working to your edge. All those things translate to business. So, but yeah, I'm grateful that my parents needed to keep 5 kids out of trouble.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a lot to learn from that. I recently had someone who was a figure skater when she was younger, and very similar story of like this was her whole life. It was just competitive figure skating. Yeah, but that's really cool. And sometimes I wish I had like I always played sports growing up, but I never had one sport that I like dedicated myself to this extent. So I think I'm sure have been so many like fundamental learnings that came from that have carried through with you.
And as we talked earlier, a big part of what I realized is at the beginning of every year, our coach sat us down and we set goals. I mean, I'm a teenager setting goals. And that whole experience was really a blessing because I helped take Anthony Robbins into the business marketplace. And in my late 20s, he was in his mid 20s. And that's where I realized people stop dreaming in their early to mid 20s because they don't understand the proper way to set goals. And if you want to talk about that, we can. But that whole piece of every year looking at the last year, where my times were in my individual sports, and then setting goals. A lot of people, maybe your audience has watched Michael Phelps. I loved that, where he's got on his piece of paper. And it really is true in swimming, in business, and in life. There's always going to be days you want to quit. I wish I could remember his quote where he talked about how many days there were times when he just didn't want to get out of bed. And but he did it because he had some goals set. So I realized in my early 20s that all those lessons I'd learned on goal setting, and then as I've gone on in life, obviously I found people to mentor me, coach me, work with me to be an even better version. So and same as swimming, you work to be a little bit better. Same in life, you work every day to be just a little bit better than the day before. So those are some great lessons. When I finally woke up after I graduated and said, I am done with swimming, I am never thinking about that part of my life again.
Okay, yeah, I would love to talk about goal setting and like laying out a framework for people to follow. And who knows, maybe I'll adopt it.
Well, so where we don't have enough time for me to go through everything, but I'll do the best that I can to give a framework. So the first thing that I would say is people confuse dreams and goals. And those are two entirely different things. And so you hear people say dream big, shoot for the moon. And yes, but that's a dream. That's not a goal. And they call it a big dream goal. Well, that's fine. But you have to understand that the easiest way to start with your goals, is to create a master dream list. So that's the first place I have people start. And the master dream list is if you're just taking out a piece of paper and writing master dream list at the top, and you're writing down as if money is no object and time is no object. And I'll also coach people that if you find yourself saying someday I'll do that, I always call it get off the someday I'll, just put it on your master dream list. So that's a dream. When you say someday I'll do that, you then write it down, put it on a list. And then as you go through the master dream list, you're going to pick out items that are the most important to you. And a goal is time sensitive. And then you create action plan to get to the goal. And it's interesting when people don't reach their goals, they're like, okay, it didn't work. Like, I can't even remember. We'd have to go chat GPT it. I could sit here and do it. I don't know how many times Ford Focus moved their production date, but that's like one of the most successful cars in the history of automobiles. And so if you if they missed their first production date and said, sorry, goals don't work, cars scrapped, it's like we put these expectations on ourselves without going through what I would call you plan it, you create the goal, you set it, you review it. You got to plan, do, review all the time. It's like a rocket ship on the way to the moon doesn't go in a straight line. The trajectory is just like this, which is it's okay. You just got to give yourself time. So that's what I would say. The other thing that's very critical in goal setting is you have to set yourself up to win. And so I always have people, once you've done your master dream list, and then when you determine what your goal is going to be, say we've set a goal for 90 days out or 6 months or a year, or I usually like to have the dream goals go out 5 years. It's very interesting how people freak out a little so if they freak out at 5, I have them move it out to 10 so that you can disengage that part of your brain, the conscious part of your brain, to let the subconscious work. But very important is you're actually setting 3 goals. So we'll say it's a year out, and in a year out, I do want you to set a big, hairy goal. Like, that's your big, hairy goal, BHAG goal. You set a big, hairy goal, and then you set a stretch goal. So you get to set that big goal, what you're really going for, but then you set a realistic stretch goal. Like if you were truthful with yourself, or you have someone who you can bounce things off, and you're looking at your goal and you go, really, truly, if I stretched myself, I could hit this goal. And then the third goal is minimum acceptable. So you focus on the big dream goal, but when you get to the end of the year and you look at your goals and you hit the minimum acceptable, you win. And that's the key, is to set yourself up to win. Because then what happens inside in your brain is you're like, oh, and now you're leaning forward, and then you reset another minimum acceptable, realistic stretch, and then your big dream goal, and away you go because you won. And it's a great book. It's not really about goal setting, but there's Benjamin Hardy. He talks about the gap and the gain. Are you familiar with that book? It's fantastic.
Gap in the gain. No.
So what most of us do is we measure ourselves against the gap instead of looking at the gain.
Right.
So people I'm working with, I'm teaching them, look at the gain. Where did you start? Look how far you've come. Celebrate the gain. Now we recalibrate and reset the gap, but we're not focused on the gap. And I think maybe I'm so focused on this because I have worked hard to overcome perfectionism and have conversations with myself. It's good enough for now. You did a great job. Always knowing if I say it's good enough for now, I could go back and do something to it later, which I never do because it was good. So does that help? That's the framework.
Yeah. This is awesome. I'm taking a ton from this. And I can definitely relate to the perfectionism, Leslie. I have that same thing where, sometimes I just have to put stuff aside and be like, it's okay. I don't know if you've heard, there's a quote from a famous artist. I forget who, but he said something like, masterpieces are never finished, they're abandoned.
Oh, interesting. No, I hadn't heard that one.
And if you read, there's a really good biography of Leonardo da Vinci by Walter Isaacson. And he talks about how Leonardo would carry his paintings, like the Mona Lisa, he carried with him for like 20 years. He would travel with it. He always
Wow.
had it. He's always just constantly working on it, because there's always something that's like, you look at it and you're like, I could make this a little better. So they're abandoned at some point. They're not actually finished.
Da Vinci was big on mental visualization, on it's fascinating. That whole piece, we talked ahead of time where the visualization. So visualization does go with your goals, and affirmations.
Mm-hmm.
I call them declarations, primarily because so I have business in Asia, Latin America, and it's funny, affirmations doesn't translate when you're being translated, but declarations do. And so I think of it as you're speaking into existence what you want, and then your subconscious brain hears you. So those are an important part of goal setting. Also, one thing I've started doing recently, is talking to myself. So we tend to talk to ourselves like you would never talk to someone you were coaching, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you would never talk to a loved one the way you talk to yourself. And so there is a part, although I've been doing declarations, affirmations, stated, I am so happy and grateful now that I am whatever that is that I'm wanting to do. There's also a very powerful technique when you find yourself, sometimes when people do affirmations or declarations, then that little voice that we all have in our head, that little negative voice starts going, that's not true. That's BS. That's whatever. Then turn that around and start talking to yourself as if you're the coach. You're coaching yourself. It's a very powerful technique to say, you got this. You've done hard things before. You can overcome. You know what you're doing. You laid out a plan. Keep going. And you're talking to yourself as if you're coaching yourself. And there are science terms to describe what I'm talking about, but I'm not a scientist. I'm a student of learning and growing. So I'm just going to share. If you need to go look it up, but it does work to talk to yourself in a manner as if you're coaching yourself, if you're your own coach. And so that's another piece that goes with your goal setting. And then what I would say is, you do have to look at your goal that you've set. Really should look at it every day, minimum once a week. So there's lots of triggers. I like using visualization boards, or manifestation board, or whatever you want to call it, because the visual part of the brain sees where you're going. So there's lots of power in that, regardless of what people say. And as an athlete, here's where I learned and connected the dots as an adult, being in business for myself. Because when you're in business for yourself, here's what I learned, probably maybe almost about 30 years ago. Oh my God. I started when I was 2. About 30 years ago, I learned, or I had the understanding, that your business, and I guess you could say your life, or whatever project you're working on, it'll never be any bigger than you are. So it is a constant learning and growing. It's like peeling an onion. You just keep peeling. You just keep going. And I was going to share something else with you, but I'll remember it in a moment. I got to thinking about how long ago. I know, as an athlete, you probably wouldn't remember, but the Russians were seriously dominating the Olympics. And it turns out they were, in addition to probably doing some drugs and stuff they shouldn't have, but it did turn out that they were studying the mind and visualization. So when I was a teenager as a swimmer, so I swam AAU, I think I don't know what it's called now. But that was the Amateur Athletic Union, because that was girls, boys, all of us. Our coach had us, if you were sick. So I clearly remember one time I had a very bad cold and I couldn't go to swim practice. And the coach had me literally spend an hour in bed visualizing, eyes closed, visualizing my entire workout exactly as I would have done it. And the research shows, which is really crazy, that's about 80% effective. As if I had been there doing not 100% workout, but an 80% workout. That's how powerful your brain is. So all of those things, taking all those experiences and go, oh yeah, I did this as a teenager. It does work. Okay, let's go take it for something else besides swimming.
Yeah, to go back to this big hairy goal, which I love this idea. And yeah, I got to figure out what that looks like for me. Nicholas Marigali is a professional grappler. He's in jiu-jitsu. And there is a story I heard where he was basically the best in the world. He probably is still one of the best in the world in the gi, which the gi, for listeners who don't know, is like the pajamas, the whole outfit that you wear in jiu-jitsu. And he was the best in that division. But then there's also no gi, which is where you just wear like basically like tight clothes. There's no like grabbing. It's almost like a different sport. And he had never like professionally competed at that level. And he set this goal for himself that he wanted to win first place at ADCC, which is like the top no-gi grappling tournament. Mm-hmm. And that year he got second place. And so it's one of those things, like it's almost, if you would have heard that ahead of time, you'd be like, that's a ridiculous goal to even think, because people have spent their entire lives specifying in no-gi, just doing this one thing. And here he comes in and he gets second place because he set this like major, huge goal. So
he probably focused on it, visualized it. When I was in college, I was a huge baseball fan. I dated a baseball player, and there's so much that goes into what you say to yourself, what is said to you about achieving your goals. And I think it was the World Series. And sorry, when I was doing training regularly, I used to use this example a lot. But the coach, I think it was last batter, bottom of the ninth. I think it might have been the Yankees or maybe the Orioles. I don't know, Baltimore. The coach came out, stopped the game. The guy was in a rhythm, the pitcher. And the coach came out and said, whatever you do, do not throw high and outside. Well, the brain can't process negatives. I used to drive my friends crazy because I wouldn't say, don't forget. I would say, please remember. They're like, why are you telling me what to do? Because we have a phrase as a culture saying, don't forget. But then your brain can't process the don't. It has to visualize forgetting and then put the do not in, and it's confusing. So the coach says, whatever you do, don't throw high and outside. Where do you think the guy threw?
High and outside.
Yes. It's like, don't spill the milk to kids. You're just telling them, spill the milk. They got to visualize spilling the milk and then put the don't in. It's very interesting when you study the brain, how you talk to yourself, what a difference it makes. So, and that all makes a difference in setting goals. If you've got a big, hairy goal you're going for, but you're, on the other hand, telling yourself you can't do it, there's no way, you're going to have a much harder time getting there. I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying, why not make it easy on yourself? Why not just embrace talking to yourself in a positive manner? So when I was working with Tony, he used to have us wear a rubber band, and every time, we would pop our wrist. Well, when I was going through certification with him, he would have us pop our wrist if we were saying something negative or saying you can't or whatever. And it just as an awareness piece.
It's like a physical reminder of what you're
Yes.
doing every day, all the time. Okay, so
Yourself a
Leslie,
little,
you've
hurt yourself a little bit so you'll stop doing that.
yeah. So you have done a bunch of different things throughout your life and career. Have there been any moments in which you didn't know like where you were going or what the path forward was?
Hmm, That's true for most people. I thought I graduated. My degree is for the petroleum industry. I thought I would be in that industry. My father was an engineer in the petroleum industry. I graduated with a, a degree that was for business with geology, engineering, and law. Very interesting degree. Worked as a landman, and know what's on Netflix is not reality. So we just go there. My brother, who's an attorney, one of my brothers who's an attorney, we laugh about it all the time. But anyway, that's an aside. But now people
Uh-huh.
have heard what a landman is, but that is not it. Anyway, I thought I would be doing that forever. When I got to the executive level, I got there at a really young age because I came out of school timing in business before the oil embargo. And so I went far fast. And I literally looked around and said, yeah, I want to make a difference. I want to spend time with my family. I want to have fun. I think all of us are put here to impact others in some positive manner. And I had been studying personal growth. So I started looking, what can I do? I got to do something else. I need to be in business. I knew nothing about being in business. I knew nothing. But I just found people to mentor me and coach me. And I think that was one of the biggest lessons from Tony is find someone who's done what you want to do and walk behind them. There's no reason not to do that. So yes, because in general, I was somewhat shy, and it was one thing to be negotiating deals when I had the control. It was another thing to be talking to other humans and being able to motivate them, share, etc. So that was a huge pivot when I started spare time while I was working full time on my job in network marketing. It's a very misunderstood industry. You will not succeed unless you work on yourself and you help other people. And that's what I loved about it was I was helping other people get what they wanted. It gave me what I wanted versus corporate, which for me ended up being win-lose. For me to get ahead, someone had to lose. And so I pivoted to that. But then here's the challenge. I didn't know what was a good company, what was a bad company. No one taught me in business school. It's fascinating. You get a degree in business and they don't teach you how to evaluate a business. They don't teach you how to work for yourself. So there I was again on this huge learning curve, how to be in business for myself. So yeah, that was pretty scary. And then I lost my job because I made too much money, quote unquote. Sorry, you're really good at what you do, but you make too much money. Bye. We're going to put the two people you've been training in your job, like, okay, together they made less money than me. All right. So that was intense because I made a lot of money in the oil industry. And I think, like a lot of people, when you first who start businesses, what was it in 2020 was the great resignation, right? Everybody was going to be in business for themselves. And then by 21 or 22, it was the great regret. Yes, it's like, so, that's definitely, you got to find people. And with the internet and YouTube and podcasts like yours, you can set aside some time every day to learn, to work on yourself, to be a little bit better. So, but yes, And then I didn't pick the right company. It went out of great products, went out of business because the owner was a doctor. Do they teach doctors how to run a business in medical school? The answer is no. So, I mean, I literally thought, William, that if you were in my late 20s when I started this entrepreneur journey, I thought, well, if you're starting a business, you know what you're doing, like other people. Like I would join with them because if you started a business, you know what you're doing. And that is absolutely not true. So it just that whole journey of learning what does a good company look like? What, if you're going to affiliate with something, just because you have a good product doesn't make it a good business. I might want to use a product, but not promote or be an affiliate. So I think my tolerance for risk is probably higher than a lot of people. And that just developed with probably stretching myself with the competitive swimming, with the personal growth. So I guess, again, I would say setting goals, visualizing, knowing what you want, knowing where you want to go, and then just relentlessly pursuing that on a consistent basis. It's called the slight edge. So slight edge either works for you or against you. And that's what most people miss, like going to the gym, or getting in shape. It's like if you need to do a pull up, if you can only do a half of one, that's great. And then you can do one, then you can do two. Business is the same way. I know I kind of went off on a tangent. Hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, yeah. I noticed when you were first talking about business, there was almost like you lit up a little. You were really excited. You're like, I knew it was business. So where did that like certainty that business was for you?
I figured out that I can help give people more choices in life. So when I first started, that's interesting that you saw that. When I first started years ago, it was about me. I wanted more choices. I wanted more out of my life. I wanted to travel. I wanted more money. I wanted to make the same amount of money, but not have to go to work in the dark, come home in the dark, and work weekends. And so it took me a number of years to figure that out. And once I figured that out, I was like, I can give this gift to other people, family, friends. I always say, there's someone looking, someone who wants a little bit more out of life, is interested in learning how to be an entrepreneur. I'm at a stage in life where I'm doing this podcast because I really enjoy giving back and serving. But yes, I love helping people be able to have the time to create joyful memories, because when you get to the end of your life, it really is about the memories you've created. But if you have the finances, the financial ability, like to fly home on a Monday instead of a Sunday from a conference or from a vacation, so that you're not in the middle of all that craziness, or to say, hey, I'm going to stay one more day. Or when my father had a stroke, I think everybody's one life event away. I actually think everybody should have a side gig personally, because life, happens. But my father had a stroke, and as the oldest of five, I was the only one that could take my laptop, my cell phone, and go help my mom. And my husband was great. He's like, yes, go. So I took my business with me and was able to help my mom, whereas we're a very close family. So my other brothers and sisters couldn't do that for weeks on end during the rehab period. And then that's how I ended up getting my mom and dad a personal trainer. It was like, okay, I can't be here forever. And that was kind of cool to have it's funny. That was on my dream board, my master dream list, to have a personal trainer a couple of times a week. So I ended up doing that for my parents. Isn't that funny how some of us will do things for other people before we'll do them for ourselves? Eventually, yes, right. I was able to get a personal trainer, but they got the personal trainer before I did. And it's such a gift, because he agreed to take my dad, and he agreed to train my mom for same charge he was doing my father. And so my mother started lifting weights at 75, and man, in her 90s, she was leg pressing 300. And I remember being in the gym with her, and I was just standing there staring. And she's like, well, because this is a leg press where you add free weights. And what she had done was there was a small one and a big one, and they were like not perfectly lined up. And I think she thought that's what I was looking at. I was standing there counting the weight. She goes, it was just, this was on here and that. She was making an excuse. And I said, no, I'm looking at the 345 pounds you're leg pressing. I don't even know if I can do that. It was pretty funny. It was stunning. And I posted it on Facebook, and someone goes, oh, that's Photoshopped. I'm like, nope, not Photoshopped. So, speaking of longevity, since we're on this topic, I'm going to get it out there. If you're a man or a woman and you're not doing squats, going to the gym, my doctor said to me, he said, you can live alone as long as you can get up and down off the toilet. So if you want to know what motivates me to still go to the gym, it's, oh yeah, he's right. I probably should do those lunges and squats that I hate.
Mm-hmm.
They've become my friend. I reframed them. And that's really probably a strength of mine, William, is I can take things that maybe I know that are important for my business or my life and reframe them into why I'm doing them. And so you keep that in front of you, because a lot of times people move away from pain rather than move towards gain.
Right.
And so I'm and that piece for me is moving away from. I have that picture of what it could be versus what I want it to be. So as a motivation.
Yeah, that's very powerful motivation when there's something, when you have to get really clear on what that thing is. Because I think a lot of us live in this like kind of murky, like with health especially, it's hard to really concretize like, okay, if I live this way, I will die earlier. Like my life will end earlier. But once you like get clear with that, that is a very powerful motivation.
And I think most people, because of being an athlete, I had good eating habits. And when you're swimming 10 miles a day, you're tired all the time. And I'm blessed that I was raised on baked food, not fried, clean, vegetables, protein, all those things. It's habit. It's a habit. So I knew eventually. It's interesting. People made fun of me even just 30 years ago for the way I ate. Even one of my daughters called me the food police. I was offended, but not really. I have sweets like everybody else, and I indulge, but I do it in a manner that's, I don't even know how I got off on this topic, but it's in a manner that supports me long term. And it does catch up with you. I have friends that are not mobile, unfortunately. My mother, we went to Prague. She was 92. If you've never been to Prague, it's a lot of walking, a lot. And the first day we got lost. We had toured the city, and then we decided we would go see some concert in some church. And then we went to dinner and we walked, and then we missed the whatever got back to the hotel, little boutique hotel at 2 a.m. They had locked the doors. We had walked 6 miles. I was dying. My mother walked every day until a couple of years ago. So funny. I told her, I said, my hip flexors are screaming at me. I don't know if I can do this again. She's like, fine. It's just that slight edge, because she had been walking up and down hills. She lived in Lakeway, Austin area, up and down hills, 5-10 miles a day. Neighbors thought she's crazy. She was able to travel the world in her 90s.
Yeah, it's incredible.
We were the talk of the hotel, by the way, for breakfast the next morning. Everybody was pointing at us. So we had to bang on the door to get someone to let us in.
How do you keep that clarity of like, how do you hold on to those motivations and not let yourself slide into like habits or behaviors that don't support your long-term goals?
Track what I do. So I literally, when I plan, so part of goal setting and planning is planning the month before the month begins, planning the week on Sunday before the week begins. And I map out and look at, just as important, I've learned that if I'm going to the gym, like I didn't have it written down this morning and it started raining, so it was an easy excuse not to go. But normally, like tomorrow, I have it in my planner. So I actually map out, and those are appointments with myself. So if somebody says, can you do such and such at 12? I'm like, no, I already have an appointment. I've learned to prioritize myself because as I learned from one of my billionaire mentors, if you don't have your health and you have money, what difference does it make? And so he actually made us, this was in the 90s, yes, early 2000s. Early 2000s. He actually, when we had I think we had about a 3-day retreat with the top leaders, 6 and 7 figure earners that were in the company I was working with. And he made us do a whole half day on health, organic food, eating green. And he climbed Mount Everest at, I think, 82. It's not a dream of mine, so don't worry. But that was his dream. And there's actually a picture of him on the internet with "Attitude is Everything," holding that sign up at the top of Mount Everest. So that's how you got to be intentional. I'm doing a training tonight, as I shared with you, for our team, and it's halfway through the year roughly, and it's, what are your intentions? What are you intentional about? What is it you want? Things change. What we want to do, be, have. What goals did you set in December, January for this year? And do we need to plan to review? So I would say that it's an attitude of habitude. It's an attitude of creating habits. Like when I get up in the morning, I drink water. I used to get up and drink coffee. I still drink coffee, but I wait an hour and a half or 2 hours now. So I get up in the morning, I drink easy 20, sometimes 24 ounces of water, because I know you need water, and that gets it out of the way when I get too busy and get going. And I'll put a little bit of salt in it. And then I usually do stretching exercises, etc. I do my personal growth in the morning, and then I have coffee and eat. And if I'm going to go work out early in the morning, I will take in a little bit of protein first. For men, there's that huge debate. Do you work out fasted or not fasted? For women, it's very bad to work out fasted. I don't know about men because I'm not a man and I'm not studying that. So, but for women, you need a little bit of protein, a little bit of carbs, like 15 grams, something like that. So anyway, I've just built those habits. Is every morning, I would say I do that 6 out of 7 mornings. And it's because I've put it in my schedule.
What was it like when your father had a stroke? Like what do you think you took from that experience other than the getting a personal trainer?
So this is hard to talk about, but it changed my perspective on what's important, because my husband and I were doing some nonprofit foundation work. We were in Austria. My father had his stroke, so I had spent all that time with my mom. Then I went out of the country for about 3 months, and I would talk to my father on the phone, but he was completely lucid, all brain cells, laughed at the jokes in the right place, but it was an ischemic stroke, so it affected his speech. So it was very hard to talk on the phone, and he was going to speech therapy. Leslie is a very hard name to say. I did not know that. I learned it later when I started working in South Korea and Japan, and L is a very hard letter to pronounce. And so I would talk to him as best I could. And we were supposed to go see him the week got back first part of the week. We were supposed to go see my dad, and made the decision to fly over to Arizona to do something for business, and that, oh, we'll go when we get back. And mom took him in for a checkup. They had given him a ultrasound, and it burst his gallbladder, and he was gone. There's nothing worse than getting a call from your mother when you knew you should have been there, and you weren't. I don't, I had PTSD for a year. I mean, I don't know, William. Do you think God, the universe, whatever it is, gives you lessons so you can have empathy and feel, experience things for other people? I really feel for soldiers. PTSD is real. I've totally lost my short-term memory for a year. And thank God I had a supportive husband that just kept, I couldn't remember anything that had happened the day before. I had all my long-term memory, but no short-term memory. It was pretty crazy. So to answer your question, it made me, if I have to make a decision, like if I'm in the middle of doing something for business, but my mother would call, I didn't care who it was, President of the United States, like, sorry, my mom's calling, hold on a minute. And it shifted my priorities for what's important. Family for me is really, really important. We were always close. My dad, being an engineer, I kind of followed in his footsteps in the petroleum industry, and we had an opportunity to be at conferences together. And so I was very close. I was a daddy's girl. He was a golfer. I used to caddy for him. I thought that was the coolest thing in the world, to get up at 6 a.m. and have footprints on the grass. He never used a golf cart. He always walked. Those habits, right? I would encourage people, really, it's in the framework of what you're saying, is if your family and yourself is important and you're interested in healthy longevity, then prioritize those things. You can still get it all done. It's interesting, Will, people talk about balance, and they think balance is that you have this perfect life, that you're able to juggle all these things. But what balance really is yes, you can have it all, but maybe this week you're focused only on family, or majority on family, or maybe this week it's all focused on business, or you're taking a trip, and you actually, like my husband and I, we have a date tomorrow night, because if we don't schedule in our planners time for ourselves, it never happens, and then the relationship drifts apart. And so that's was the lesson that I learned. And I would just encourage people to really, I don't know, what do you take from that? It's clearly, it's not as raw as it was for me, but it's still, my mother used to say, your father loved you, quit beating yourself up. As a Virgo, as a perfectionist, I'm pretty good at that. So I try not to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, Leslie. I can like feel the pain, and one of the either sad or beautiful truths of life is that like pain is how we learn. Like you learn so much through a painful experience, and I could see that that's happened here, where now you've prioritized things and you've become more conscious of what you're giving your time to and what is most important. So yeah, I think in life, like you said, there are always, like, life is gonna be difficult. That always is gonna be the case. But the more struggles you go through, the more opportunities for growth and learning.
No, I don't actually look at it like life is difficult. I just look at it like it's you're going to have challenges, and it's how you deal with the challenges. And that you either go around, through, over, but there's always a way. And so I do have a mantra that I say to myself when I'm working on a goal or working on something, that I say to myself, oh my goodness, this is really challenging. I just say, I find a way to win. I find a way to win. I find a way to win.
Find a way to win.
And I say that to myself. I find a way to win. I guess now I could say you find a way to win, but I find a way to win is a mantra that I have that works for me. And it's amazing how things will happen
Uh-huh.
when you're talking to the universe. Is I find a way to win, because then your subconscious mind, which is much more powerful and aware than your conscious mind, figures out a way to win. Oh, she needs to win. Okay, what is a win? So I
Right.
do look at it from that perspective.
What does your dream life look like?
Oh my goodness. I'm living part of it now. The dream life looks like a home on acreage with water, and where you're able to wake up in the morning, where I'm able to wake up in the morning and have my personal trainer come to the house and able to grow. My husband grew up on a beef farm, so he's wanting a 2-acre garden. That's a big garden, with people to help doing that. So I'm very blessed. I've got a beautiful home. I sit on acreage in the woodlands, where surrounded by trees, but like to have a compound big enough that, family wants to come visit, they can come visit. And that really, it's my coach helped me realize that, see, for some people, it's very important understanding the motivation behind what you want. Like, I want a house on the beach, but it's not about me having the house on the beach. It's a place for the kids to come and the grandkids to come to hang out and play. So it's about family. So when you're setting goals and you start looking at what is the motivation, what will your benefit be out of this goal? If you're looking at your goal, what's the benefit? And then what are the obstacles? So anyway, and then I am growing a business around the globe. And ideally, my goal is to help 100,000 families make an extra 5,000 a month. And so I have a big goal for that. So I've got a lot left to do.
That's what, $500 million total? And
Yeah.
that's really cool.
And it's definitely doable. I've done over 100 million a year in revenue a few times. So, and that's not me, actually a team of people helping them. And so that means a lot of people being able to have more choices in life and create more moments of joy.
Beautiful. All right, Leslie. Just want to say, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a very great conversation.
I loved it. Thank you. Thank you for having me. And if anyone, wants to ask a question about goal setting in your comments, I'm happy to answer.
And where
And
is there anywhere that people can follow you, keep up with you?
yes, did I not give you my social media?
I'll make sure to put it in the show notes as well. But you're also welcome to shout it out.
People can go to lesliehocker.com. Hocker, Lesliehocker. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, and I still haven't done TikTok. Okay. But lesliehocker.com, you can go there. I think I might have a freebie there. I'm not sure. I will soon if I don't, around goal setting. So, but I'd love to connect and love to support people in your journey to be the best version of yourself, because that's what I'm working on every day. It's being the best version of myself and helping to serve and love people.
Beautiful. Thank you, Leslie.
You're welcome.
Bye, everybody.